Bubba built it.
All right, so this is part 4 of Horse Force. Man, I'm impressed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're actually doing the work.
We're doing it.
I'm
yeah.
doing the work. I'm doing the
baby
steps. Yeah. All right. So anyway, as we were wrapping up last week, we were talking about the front end, doing the wide body and everything. And so now we got to get to the finishing touches of how we got the, buttoning it up, tying everything in.
More details.
Yeah, to the details, to the finer aspects of it. Yeah. And that comes down to we'll start with the front and filling in all that openness that we have between the two fenders and below the headlights.
So the front of the Mach 1, it was saddled with this. We're not at the 5 mile an hour bumper yet because it's 72, but we still had this and some had chrome, but this one is this rubberized chin bumper that sticks out, on a steel frame. And not only was it heavy, but it was a little awkward. It had a little bit of this, I don't know. It had a little bit of awkwardness to it, but then if you take it out, then there's this yawning hole in the front of the car, and then the other issue is that the stock car, to me, this front is one of the worst things about it, right?
Yeah, the headlights and that front grille, they're all the way up there, basically at the almost the end.
Yeah, I don't want to say they're bugged out, but I mean it's. If you're like me, you love the look of the front end of the 69 Camaro, for example, and where those headlights are tucked back up underneath there, and they're slightly sinister, they're slightly hooded by the top of the front end.
It's got a bit of an eyebrow to it.
Yeah, and the grille is sunken in, and I'm looking at this situation, and we have, unlike the rear where it was kind of chopped short, we had a lot of room in the front to work with.
Yes, I mean it was amazing how much space was between the engine and the radiator and the front of the car, and there's a lot of space to work with.
Yeah, so one of the things we really wanted to do was to recess the headlights and the grille way back in there, so it almost looks like a big intake on a jet.
It was a great call, and whenever you look at Horse Force and compare it to a stock Mach 1, it's like, wow, they really should have done that from the factory.
I know.
Missed opportunity. But hey, that's what we're doing this for, is to
if there was nothing for us to improve, then
why?
Yeah, and honestly, the edges and everything that we've done, they probably wouldn't have passed, standards and anyway. But yeah, so we gave it the look that it really should have had all along. And so then we had this situation also where the fenders are really flared out, and this yawning wide opening. So we had to tie that in, but when we did tie in the valance, this width was exaggerated by bringing this metalwork down underneath the grille.
Yeah.
And
it worked out really well. It looks super awesome.
So really totally recreated the whole bottom edge of the grille, and we were talking about conduit. And it is a great tool because you get this nice, not only strong but radiused edge. And so we took conduit and just hand bent it. Go out and buy a conduit bender at one of the box stores, and you can bend that with real precision. And took in this whole basically bottom edge of the grill, and then paneled it in with sheet metal, and it totally filled that whole hole. But it also wrapped right up around into the side, so that it has this beautiful smooth transition. And then the other thing that we did was we added a front spoiler.
Yeah, which wasn't there at all on the original car, and man, it really looked good. It was just again some sheet metal, right, laying around and cut all these different little pieces and basically puzzled in.
Yeah, so there's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke that goes around amongst builders like myself that employ this method. They call it calibrated cardboard. You take this stuff called Ram board. If you've never heard of it, you can buy a big roll of it for $40, and it is this single layer cardboard that is stiff enough to be able to mock up into sheet metal shapes. And basically took Ram board, and after having that shell or the framework of the conduit, made the shape of that and filled it in with the Ram board. And so I'm talking about the thing again. I did the Ram board on that, but also used that to make the chin spoiler. So you just take that Ram board and you take scissors and you cut that chin spoiler shape out, and it's reminiscent of that old Trans Am racing front spoiler. So this basically just sheet metal aluminum in the front, and then on the ends we use this stuff that we use a lot. We call it hardboard. but it is something that's available to sign companies, and it's basically like a composite aluminum and plastic sandwich material.
It's like an ABS in between two layers of aluminum, and you've got a white side, and then, depending on which one, depending on which one you get, but it takes paint well. You can actually bend it slightly. It holds its shape very nicely.
One of the things that you actually see it used for, and that you would have been familiar with perhaps, would be on. I'm talking about a viewer, would be like on gas station canopies.
Oh yeah. From there, we had to get to the back side, and we had several things that we were working with there. Again, like I said, we had to take the Lincoln part, cut it off because there was a lot of it sticking out, and then once we did that, we had to weld it back up into place, and then cover it back up with Mach 1 and some other elements as well. And it took some creativeness to fill in the holes.
So we did reuse the rear bumper because it was tucked and it was not in nice shape.
It looks good.
Yeah, and so we reused the rear bumper and we mounted it directly to the Lincoln back portion, but we still had this bit of a scrag of, I guess you could call it structural metal underneath that has no form to it. It's basically just function only. And so we took aluminum panels and made basically some trim pieces that mock up a rear valance. We actually looked at using the actual rear valance, but it was just too bulky and too much. And so we just made our own. And plus we had already changed the rear end too much, especially the whole lower quarters in the back were gone. I mean, completely gone. And so we totally fabbed those from scratch, with scrap metal that we had as well.
Yeah. And then of course you need tail lights, turn signals and all that back there. And, so what are we going to do on that?
Yeah, so we obviously could have just mocked up, and we had one tail light is all we had left.
And we could have bought another one.
We could have bought one more and just made a tail panel. But what's the fun in that?
Yeah. So what we did, you were out at the pull apart?
No, it wasn't the pull apart. I was at a junkyard with a friend. But before I get into that, I want to say this. So whenever you have a situation like we have with this car and any car build that you're doing, like for instance in this case it was no tail panel, right? If you're going to have to do some fabricating, if you're going to have to do something different, use that problem as an opportunity to do something fun, something different, something that would not have been done otherwise. Because if we're sitting there and the car has a good tail panel and tail lights in it, we're probably just going to leave it alone out of practicality, right?
Right, yeah.
But in this case, we had nothing. So let's start from scratch and just think outside the box, right? And so, as Lee mentioned, I was at a junkyard and I was looking at a Challenger, a 2010 Challenger, and I'm like, because I spent a lot of time online looking at cars that I knew had single bar taillights. And why was that again? What had given us that idea?
I don't know actually.
The Torino, right?
I guess so.
Okay, so the 69 Torino has this large, full width bar taillight, and it is really just strikingly beautiful. It's one of those weird things where it seems like to me that a lot of times the Torino, they couldn't get it right. They get the rear end looking good and the front end wouldn't look good, or they get the front end looking good but the rear is not. Yeah. But that was one of those that really is just this striking look on the Torino, and we wanted to kind of replicate that. And so I looked at Lincolns, I looked at old Oldsmobile taillights, and just hadn't decided on anything. And we're at the junkyard. I'm like, oh my goodness, that might work.
Yeah.
And we found out that it was about 2 inches too wide to fit perfectly. So it was a lot of cutting and splicing, but we fitted that Challenger taillight in there. Another thing about it though is if you ever look at how these are made, is it goes way up in there. Like literally, it's like a 6-inch channel that this thing fits in. Yeah,
it's a wide, thick piece.
Yeah, it's deep. It's got a lot of depth to it. Yeah. So we had to take more, we used more tail lighting. Sorry. We used more light fixture metal again.
Right. Yeah.
And made a piece to go in there.
Yeah. Yeah, for it to house into.
So and so that piece also became the structure for the trunk lid as well. So when we were talking in our last video, we talked about how a lot of the
rebuild that leading edge of the trunk lid because it was just Swiss cheese.
It was one of the worst panels I ever tried to reuse on something, especially something that bolts on, right? Because basically the top of the lid was functional from the standpoint of a visual element, right? But everything from the back lower 2 inches was just Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it was not just the skin, but it was also the inside as well.
The structural part of it was bad.
So
he had to cut all of that bad stuff out and then shape the metal, tack it back in, rebuild it.
Yeah, because I mean, I looked at, let's just find a trunk lid for a Mach 1, and they were gonna be like almost what we paid for the car, $400.
A little bit crazy. No.
$400 for, anyways. But we wanted it to be functional. We wanted it to be something that was sealed, and so there really wasn't any other way. So it's just one piece at a time, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And of course, so you're talking about the rear end. One of your natural inclinations is going to be the exhaust.
Yeah.
But no. We don't want to run just standard pipes out the back. What's cooler and what says 70s more than side pipes?
We love side pipes.
Side pipes are awesome.
Especially if you're a fan of Hot Wheels cars. I mean, a lot of cool Hot Wheels cars have the side pipes on them, right?
Yeah. And like in the last video, you saw those little Matchbox Mach 1s. They have side pipes on them as well.
Right.
And so, yeah, we put side pipes on. Well, he did a Star Wars van back in the early 2000s.
Years ago, built it. We built it.
Yeah.
You and I did it together. Put side pipes on that vans. You know, they had to have side pipes,
That was
right?
a Patriot kit, right?
Yeah, it was a Patriot kit, and then we did it on the
Scottsdale.
The Scottsdale
Yep.
SS. And on that, we actually bought a Patriot kit just to try to mock things up. And then we realized there's not a whole lot to this.
Yeah, just a couple of more bins, and we can get back up to the cats. We were able to keep the cats on that too.
Well, yeah, but as far as the kit itself, there was not a lot to it.
Yeah.
The bracket system, and I'm not throwing stones, but it wasn't all that great of a bracket system. We had to re-engineer a lot of
so
that.
you're talking about the heat shields
And the
all
heat
that.
shields.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that was one of the things that we experienced on the van years ago, was that the chrome that we have today is not great quality, and so you're going to get rust spotting after a year. So instead of using the chrome heat shields on the Scottsdale, we made our own heat shields.
Yeah, right. And based on the success of that, we were like, you know what, we can do it again. But this time we came up with a little bit of a different design on the pattern and how it bent together. In fact, I was really impressed with it. It ended up looking like something off of Star Wars.
It really did. It had this cool future element to it, but it was so practical because what we did was we took the elements of where the holes, the breather holes would be, and let those be the defining position for where the bend was going to occur. Because before we were like, when we did this before, we were like, we don't have a 12-foot break.
No.
We have a 4-foot break, and we needed them to be longer than that. So this was a great practical solution.
Yeah, it was. And unfortunately, this time we did use some virgin sheet metal, but you know.
Yeah, well, it was just a piece of aluminum that we.
Yeah.
Well, it was actually recycled from the old Scottsdale project.
Okay, yeah, right. So it was leftover. It was leftovers.
But then also on this, so we have the name in the heat shields, and it looks really cool and all that. And also to make this, back to what I was saying about the kit not being a whole lot to it. So really, we got online on Fleabay and bought an exhaust kit. It was one of their basic exhaust kits, 2.5 inch.
Yeah.
And was what? How much did that cost? It was less than $200, right?
Yeah, I think it was like 180 something shipped.
Yeah, so 2.5, and it had all the bins that we needed to go all the way to the exhaust and everything. But then the other thing that's cool about side pipes are the tips, right? And I don't know if you guys remember back in the 70s that Thrush made these aluminum tips that were cast aluminum that had the ribs in them, and they just were beautiful pieces.
Yeah.
And it's this square shape, and we've done a square shape on the Scottsdale, but this time we wanted to make it even more radical.
Yeah, and so you ended up taking some cardboard, right, and kept cutting it and bending it and taping it until you got your shape that you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So once again, calibrated cardboard. We took the cardboard and mocked up this tip, and then we actually had some other recycled metal, just some shelving and we used, and it happened to be just the width that we really needed.
Yeah.
So literally used all that.
Even the flange, the pre-bent flange on that, right?
Yeah, but the only difference was we took and it was at a 90, we moved it in so it had this beveled appearance on the outside of it. So it was really kind of proud of these tips, how they turned out, because it was just one of these just bombastic, who has a car. that has these giant, they were trapezoidal. They actually flare out as they go back.
Yeah.
Trapezoidal tips. And that, talking about bombastic, that brings me also to the guns, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, right. The guns
We
on
talked
the
about
front
that.
of it.
Yeah.
Again, so you recess the headlight assembly and everything. Now you've got room for something really cool there. What are you going to put that's cooler than guns?
Guns. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's got to be guns.
Who doesn't want guns?
So, yeah.
On their car. So the other thing, though, of course, that any build is going to be a big problem is paint.
Yeah, paint.
There's cubic dollars you can spend on it.
Yeah, major bucks. I mean, you could go Concourse, which is what? Is it 6 figures?
I mean, it could be.
I-
A decent paint job nowadays is going to cost you $15,000 if it's something that needs.
At the very least.
Yeah.
At the very least. And we can.
So that's your range.
Yeah, again, we've seen the Riddlers and the Great Eights and things like that, and we can really appreciate that and how beautiful the paint is, something that you could just swim in. But man, it's not something that is relatable to us. It's not something that we have the skill set to do. So what do? We go and get enamel paint from the hardware store and roll it on.
Yeah. So look. So the thing about the shiny paint jobs, and we can all appreciate a beautiful shiny paint job, but unfortunately, I don't know if you're like me, but when I go to a car show, I might go, wow, you can swim in that paint. That's really nice. But then I walk on and I don't really take and give it a whole lot of a second look because it's kind of boring. Nice paint is boring, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt. And so, again, just necessity being the mother of invention, we started this. We'd heard about I think the Roco guys had done a tractor paint roll-on thing one time, and we had just tried that some years ago, and we found that it to be a really great way to paint a car.
Yeah.
Really, on the Horse Force, half the paint you're looking at is original. So the hockey stripe down the side is original. The Mach 1 is original. A lot of the white paint that you see is original. So we literally took a piece of the car, and you can go to, I think it's Home Depot, but if your Home Depot doesn't mix enamel, you can also go to Sherwin-Williams or some of those places, and you can take a piece of your car, and they will laser that thing, and they'll make a color that matches it, and that's what we did on Horse Force, and you really can't tell where we
Where it
added
starts
paint.
and where we began. So
Look, again, the thing about a slick all over paint job is it covers up the story the car has to tell.
Yeah.
And we want to tell that story. We want to let that story come out. And again, it's this idea of taking something that was a problem and accentuating it into something and leveraging it into something good. So we took the original black hockey stripe and then added a blue and red stripe to it. Because again, this was going to be this thing that's basically a mashup between Herbie and Death Race 2000, right?
yeah, and you can do this with vinyl, right? But there's a little bit of something extra there if you use paint, and it does take more time to do it, but the results are really cool. And again, it tells a story that
Right.
vinyl and other things just aren't going to do.
Right.
They're going to fall short.
So you've heard of faux patina, and we don't really feel like that's a good description of what we're doing. I've seen some bad faux patina, I've seen some decent faux patina, but what we're doing is just leaving the original patina and just matching the new material to that.
Yeah.
And so we feel like it's a more authentic way to do it. And but the other trick there though is once you do it, then you have to take and rub it down. And sometimes you even have to add a little bit of background color, because one of the things the roller does do is it gives you some orange peel texture, and then you can then fog some black or some
Brown, gray,
right?
just a darker contrasting color to fill in,
Yeah.
and to bring that back on out.
And then you rub that down, and then all of it starts to just really match, like it was all made together.
Yeah, right. And of course, the number on the side there that we've done with the gumball, it's one of our favorite things to do. The number 8, of course, marks our 8th build.
Yeah.
Moving on from the exterior and the paint of the car that that we did, well, we go to the interior. And again, we'd love to have used the original seats that
They
were
were
in
beautiful.
really cool. And I think that we could have really brought that cover back out. It would have looked good, but it was really a little too far gone
Yeah.
as far as the split seams, and then it wouldn't have been very comfortable to sit in.
There's a little bit of backboard, kind of a thinly upholstered seat. So
Yeah, and the frames were really rough, and so a friend of ours had a Porsche 944, and he had taken the seats out of it because he made it into a drag car.
yeah, so he had them upholstered in this really beautiful, rich brown vinyl, and it really wasn't something we had considered. But again, necessity being the mother of invention. Well, let's just see what they look like, because they definitely, if you're familiar with the 944 seat, they have that 70s tie back bucket look to them.
Yeah.
So they definitely looked at home.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
they're very
Especially in that
comfortable.
Lincoln Mark 8 carpet.
Yeah.
The rest of the interior fit very well.
Yeah, so that was the other thing. We ended up reusing the Lincoln carpet. We took it out and power washed it, and because it was kind of gross. But we probably wouldn't have reused it if we hadn't had something to tie it all together. And the brown seats did that.
Yeah, and for the back seats, we just used the seats out of the Lincoln Mark 8.
Which they were this cream leather color. Now, if you've ever dyed leather, as long as you're going as you're staying in the same family, first of all, it's a good idea. And as long as you're not trying to make something light on top of a dark background, it generally will work. And so we bought some of that multi-purpose interior dye paint.
Yep.
And don't try to lay that on too thick. If you do, it'll be a mess. And
several
light
light coats, and make sure you're going in different patterns too as you lay it down. So fogging it light to start with to get the foundation, and then build on that, but don't build too much.
Right. So if you don't let it dry fully between layers, it's going to be a nasty mess. But if we didn't tell you that we had dyed that back seat, you wouldn't really know it. I mean, it's close enough in color that it worked, and also the package tray in the back. Literally reused the package. Well, so the back seat structure, the back seats, and the package tray are all from Lincoln.
Yeah.
And those were tan, and I didn't want tan in the back window, so we did dye that carpet black. And you can just take this multi-purpose paint, if you're careful, and you can dye a lighter
carpet darker,
and it really looks good.
It does. It looks very nice.
So that's the back shelf, and then the door panels. That was one of the cool things.
Yeah. So where did we get those? That was in the which car was that in?
That was in that Kevin Harvick.
Oh yeah. We bought a NASCAR chassis, and we pulled the door cards out of it. The inside.
They were Butler built. It says Butler built, and they're these velour upholstered door panels basically in this stock car, and they were really cool, and they had this 70s vibe, and they had pleats, and they were black velour, and we're like, let's just take some tech screws and screw them. Now look, it's one of the things about this Mustang was the door panels were really cool when it was new, and and this one being a deluxe interior, it had these sculpted door panels with the wood panel in there, and I don't even think you can buy those now. I don't think those are even available, and if they were, they'd be $1,000 for the pair.
Yeah.
And so we were just only had one, and we probably could have rehabilitated them if we had two. But anyway, so that Butler built velour panel. And it's got some heat shielding because it was in a race car. Yeah,
it worked out very well. And then, of course, we did back to the dash. We couldn't use the dash in from the Mark 8, so we had to go with the Mustang, the Mach 1 dash.
But I had to integrate all the electronics, and that was from
the Mark 8.
Yeah, so it was, that was a pain in the butt, but because the dash is already meant to fit around those A-pillars, that part of it was okay. It was just making all the components fit. Right. That was a real pain, but we were able to pull that off.
Yeah, and then, of course, we wanted to do some fun things. Back to the movie theme, the movie idea, and we took an old phone that he had.
Yeah, the basement, that's right.
Yeah, and cut took the cord off of it, and then threaded it through the center console of the car, made a little piece for it to go in. Looks like cup holders, but it's not.
It's for the phone.
Yeah, the Force phone.
Yeah, we stenciled Force phone on it. Yeah. And just, again, to kind of add to the campiness of it. But you mentioned the console, too. That was another cool thing. We had a friend that works for the county, and he got us for free an old salvage a police car center console, and it was really very modular the way it was made, and it worked really well.
It fit very nicely. It looks good. It looks really good.
So the interior is a complete hodgepodge, but it's functional and it's fun and it's campy, and really fun is what we're trying to do here, right?
Absolutely. Let's just go ahead and talk about this as far as the interior goes. Again, with the movie idea, we wanted to have another little prop to go with us, and so Michael made a helmet that would have been used in the Horse Force movie.
Right.
So, and it turned out really well.
Yeah,
The old
so-
motorcycle helmet.
So found some old Simpson racing gloves too that were just worn out.
Yeah.
And so we put those old Simpson racing gloves under the helmet and we're displaying the car. And we took an old motorcycle helmet, an old cheap helmet, and spray bombed it bronze colored, and then spray bombed the red and blue stripes on it. And we used one of those. If you're familiar with old motorcycle helmets, you know they had those snaps for the visors. And we used one of those bubble visors that smoked.
Yeah.
And then we took some old headphones. Because
From the thrift store. We went to the thrift store and bought some. We bought 2 or 3 pairs.
gamer
of
headphones, and they had this really cool RoboCop look to them with the thing that comes around. And so we just cut them all up and just screwed them onto the side. And so it looks like you have this robo, electronic.
Hey, it looks every bit as good as anything from Buck Rogers or any of those 70s sci-fi movies.
Yeah, but what it does is it's just that extra little touch. So the details are what draws you in. And it's like we were talking about the rear end too. It's like people are like, wait a minute, where have I seen that tail light before? And you're like, that's off a Challenger, right? So those type of things and like on the paint on the sides, we did like the skulls, where the kills, and stuff like that. But anyway,
and then of course. So when you get the car done, if you can ever call them actually done, they're never really done. But anyway, now it's time to start taking shows. And one of the big things, so we had gone to.
We've done the LS Fest.
LS Fest.
And Scott Kirk from Holly was like, hey, what are you guys working on? Blah, blah, blah. And we were like, well, we got this Ford Mustang that we're working on. He goes, Ford Fest is in, what was it? It was something crazy, like 5 weeks. It was
that long? I don't think it was that long.
It was definitely no more than 5 weeks. It was more than 3. It was like 4 or 5 weeks. He was like, Ford Fest is in a month and a half, and
the car's not done.
He's like, oh, we'll find a picture of where it was when he said that.
Yeah.
So it was not close to being done. Like I think I just gotten the taillights mocked in. Anyway, he was like, if you get it ready, you can come debut it at Ford Fest. And we're like,
oh, man, the rush was on.
So we're gonna turn up the wick.
Yeah, and well, man, busted some serious rear end, put some serious hours in, and then made it.
We made it, and we drove. So we had it. The first time it really drove, since we'd cut it all apart, was onto the trailer and off the trailer, and then that night at Ford Fest. We were actually staying. My mom lives in Bowling Green, so we were staying with my mom and drove it the 12, 14 miles to my mom's place, and it did great. We were like, this thing's.
It's always that moment, you get into the fresh build.
Yeah, you're like,
you turn the key.
Is it really going to be a mushroom cloud? I don't know.
Going to do it? How far do I have to go? Where can I pull off? Where's going to be a good place for me to stop?
The electric fans kicked on just like they did before. The air conditioning worked. I mean, it was like Xanadu.
So it worked out, and then of course we took it to Autorama. Had a great time there, and then hopefully we're going to be on Hot Rod Power Tour next month.
Yeah.
Wow, next month.
Less than a month.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, hey, guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, please take a moment, subscribe to our channel, give us a like, thumbs up, comment. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.